And what is your view of the current state of the American judicial process in the way that it imposes the death penalty?
I think that's going to vary from place to place. I would have to say it looks as if in Illinois at the moment it's in pretty bad shape. Whether that is true in the rest of the country, I don't know. I'm sure that G.W. Bush would suggest that in Texas it is not, even though they've had a number of executions there. Some people like to cite statistics that go to show that there's some disproportionate impact on folks in the black community and so forth. I'm always a little suspicious of those statistics, though, I have to tell you. One of the things that I would suggest that people who indulge in that sort of thing do, side by side with the statistics about who's on death row and what their race is, I would like them to put the statistics of who's in the grave and who the victims were. And I think one would discover from that juxtaposition that if you send a soft signal to some of the folks who are in jail for killing people, you will find that there's been a lot of black-on-black violence out there. And that what you are actually doing is offering a license to the killers to prey on innocent, helpless people in their community. And I don't think that that ought to be the outcome. So I think we have to be reasonably tough. And that includes, by the way, another issue, which I'll just throw out there pro forma. I've been watching all this toing and froing about racial profiling, right? In and of itself, people want to suggest there's something awful and horrible about this. I think if you find that it's motivated by racism and discrimination, that's one thing, and that's obviously bad. But I put it to you. If I am a taxi driver, that's going on right here in D.C. right now, among black taxi drivers too, by the way, or if I'm a policeman, and I find over the course of my long experience that certain kinds of crimes seem to be committed disproportionately by individuals who are young black males, we shall now put a law on the books forbidding me to act according to my experience, forcing me to put myself in greater danger than my experience would suggest I ought to? Something in me revolts against this. And I am reminded of the way I was brought up, see? And the way I was brought up by my parents was to remember at all times that, yes, I was out there, I was doing stuff for Alan Keyes and this and that, but everywhere I went, I represented family and I represented my race. When are we going to stop making excuses for some of the folks out there who don't want to remember that? Who don't want to remember that in everything they say and everything they do, they are either building or destroying the reputation of the black community. I am sick to death of people making excuses. They're poor, they're this and that. So was my father. So were his relatives. That poverty did not excuse depravity, and they never took it for an excuse. Instead, they took it upon themselves to understand that whatever your condition, you can still have the moral decency to care about what your actions say to and about your community. And I wish we'd get that message out there, because I'll tell you, I would feel badly thinking that some racists out there were targeting black folks disproportionately without ground or experience or foundation. But on the other hand, if there is ground and experience and foundation, you know, the people I feel badly about, the people who are out there behaving in such a way as to destroy the reputation of my race. I am sick to death of them, and I call on them to examine their conscience and stop what they're doing.
Do you find, after your experiences in states like Iowa and New Hampshire, or in the reception that you get from a largely white audience, that racism is dead in the presidential campaigns?
No, I wouldn't go that far. No. It's not even entirely clear to me at some times whether racism is even taking a nap, but I certainly don't think that it's dead. I would say this, though, and this is something that I feel badly about, because I think that the response to the Keyes campaign in different parts of the country, including, by the way, say Alabama, which stayed in the Deep South, supposedly representing intransigent resistance against civil rights during the civil rights movement, you know, the famous images of Bull Connors and the dogs and so forth and so on. Well, it turned out we went down to take part in the straw poll there. And contrary to what some people in the media lyingly portrayed, that straw poll wasn't something where people came desultorily together and Alan Keyes got some votes because he showed up. That was a nonsensical lie. And sometimes I really do, and I'll get to this in a minute, wonder what is going on with media folks who have no greater respect for the truth than that. Or is it laziness, or is it just a total disregard for the facts? In point of fact, the Alabama straw poll went on for weeks. All the campaigns did their phone calling, sent their literature, lobbied the delegates who were going to that convention, and at the end of the day, when the vote was taken in the Alabama straw poll, Alan Keyes came in #1 in the heart of the Deep South. I think it's time we started looking not just at the negative things. Sure, there's a ways to go in terms of race relations. We all know this. There are bigotry, and there's prejudice, and there's hate, and there's racism still alive out there. But at the same time, don't we ever have the right to give ourselves some credit? Not only for the progress we've made in law, but for the change of heart that has occurred on the part of many folks all over the country, especially in the South. And I guess I am waiting, hopefully, and praying, whether it's in South Carolina or somewhere else, that in a way that the country can't ignore, voters will go to the polls and just vote heart and conscience to cast before the American people this reality that there are many, many folks in this country of both races who can put aside bigotry and simply vote for what they believe to be right for America. It's universal? No, it's not universal. But I think there are enough now so that those folks, in fact, can be the determining element of our politics. One final thought, though. There's one place where I found that race wasn't at all dead in American political life. And it's right and fitting, I guess, that I should explore this right here and now in front of the National Press Club. Because I think that the media has, in my experience, been egregiously guilty of this problem. And I don't mean it in some hateful, racist motivation. Nah, I don't know about that. I do know, however, that the media tended to act according to their stereotype of black Americans. And if you didn't fit that stereotype, they filtered you out. They were unwilling to take seriously what you offered and presented because, according to that stereotype, you were supposed to be a liberal and a Democrat and a pro-abort and all these things, which, by the way, when you actually look at the surveys, do not track. Those things do not track necessarily the issues part of it on abortion, things like that, with the real feelings of the black community. Many black folks are conservative on these issues. And certainly, therefore, one isn't justified in having some stereotype that acts as if those sentiments do not exist. But the media did, and it does act according to such a stereotype, in my opinion. And it's been really hard battling that. Now, you say, well, Alan, that's not racism. Yes, it is. Or at least, let's put it this way, it is bigotry. A matter of fact, it was the characteristic of bigotry in America. Contrary to what we try to convince ourselves of these days, what made the American racial problem so intransigent was not hatred. It was prejudice. It was the ability of decent-minded folks to act according to prejudicial stereotypes that would allow them to have great relations with their black maid and their black gardener and their black laborer in the field, but who just couldn't process the black lawyer and the black doctor and others who didn't fit their bigoted stereotypes. The heart of bigotry is prejudice, not hatred. The heart of bigotry is the application of stereotypes which allow you to impose upon others what you think they ought to be. The truth of the matter is that if we are to become what we ought to be, then individuals ought to be allowed in their actions, in their words, in their conduct, in their views, to speak for themselves. And folks ought to understand, no matter what side they are on, that you don't know what it means to be black in America until you have taken seriously what actual black folks do. And even if that doesn't correspond to your stereotype, you have no right to abuse and exclude it. And if you do, you are as guilty of bigotry and prejudice as any of your racist forebears were. So you can excuse it for yourselves if you like, but you haven't gotten that far from the tree of prejudice and racism.
How should news organizations behave in order to correct the bigotry that you find? Is it a matter of affirmative action to hire more black members of the press? What needs to be done?
Well, no. See, why is it, why is it that we always think we need some program, this or that? No, I would say very simply, you know what ought to be done? Just tell the truth. That's all. That's all I would ask. Just tell the truth. no special favors, no special treatment of any kind, and so forth and so on. But just tell the truth. Don't do what the Washington Post does in this town. No, I'm sorry. Don't do that. Because you can scour the pages of the Washington Post, and among my supporters, it's proverbial now that on the day that a primary occurs and the Washington Post does not report to you who won, it means that I did. Their bias in this regard has been egregious, okay? It's sick. So no special favors asked or required, no this or that, you know? In terms of affirmative action, the people all over the country who are responding to my message of moral priority and moral renewal are taking all the affirming action I need. And they will go out and continue, I hope, to take that action on behalf of the country. But I would just suggest that maybe it would be fairer if one didn't exclude the results, and if one was willing to report them with some fairness and equanimity to people around the country. You know, but we talk about all the stuff that McCain is raising. He's raising McCain, right? In terms of campaign finance reform and all this. If I may make one last point. All that stuff would probably not be necessary. There would be less reliance on 60-second spots and all this garbage that everybody says is so awful in politics if the media in this country simply did your job. Instead of trying to act as the censors and pre-selectors of the political process, just go out there and pass through to the people the information about what is being offered to them in the way of their political choice, and let them decide. Do that job with integrity. Do it with consistency. And you will be back to making what ought to be, I think, your main contribution. And by the way, your vital contribution to the success of our political system. Right now, it has become, not only with respect to me, race, whatever, it's all too much about power now, and all too little about truth. I don't know whether you're picking this up in the journalism schools now, where like the law schools, the law is what the judge says it is. I suppose the news is what you people say it is, right? That's not the attitude you're supposed to take. The attitude you're supposed to take is that you are the servants of truth, not its masters, not its creators. And insofar as you go down that other road, you give in to the temptation of power in a way that will ultimately destroy our political system.
Dr. Keyes, I'd like to briefly give you one of our Press Club certificates of appreciation. Whenever the day comes when you say your cup runneth over, the National Press Club mug will be there for you to demonstrate.
Thank you.
And we just have a moment for about a 3-word answer to the question, who's the runner-up in the Republican campaign on rhetorical skills?
I would leave that to the people to judge.
I'd like to thank you all for coming today, and I'd also like to thank National Press Club staff members Emily Reed, Pat Nelson, Joanne Booz, Melanie Abdo-Dermott, and Howard Rothman for organizing today's lunch. Also, thanks to the National Press Club Library for their research. We're adjourned.